schools, teachers, government, unions, making things work in education on this episode of Exit 425. Today's guest at Exit 425.
In the main corridor of Exit 425.
Local politicians to connect with families.
What are some unique challenges?
Thanks very much, Steve, for having me.
Exit 425. It's where we live. Richard McCormack and Chris Clarke are the presidents of Ontario's Secondary School Teachers Federation Districts 13 and 14, respectively, representing secondary teachers in Durham and Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Boards. Thanks for meeting me here at Exit 425. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks for having us.
There's been a lot of news and talk about improving our school system by getting rid of trustees and adding the student and family support offices. Are these the keys to fixing our school systems? Richard, I'll start with you.
I think that kind of distracts us from, more important issues within the school system. One of those being staffing supports in the education system, and really those trained professionals, people like social workers, EAs, psychologists, etc. And so we are lacking those in the system, and we need more assigned to each individual schools to support students. And so I do think that, the Bill 33 and so forth is just distracting from that. I don't know what the larger game is, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily address some of the things we need in the system.
I think I'm just going to be, I don't think it helps even a little bit, really,
Really?
I don't want to carry water for the trustee model, because it has flaws like everything that we do, right? Governance is what it is, right? It has problems. But having a singular point of contact for an entire school board, my school board's a lot smaller than Richard's, but again, one office in each of those spaces, it's not logical at all, right? When I think about a trustee, there's somebody who are community embedded. There's somebody who is a familiar person, hopefully, to a number of people in the community, and they can advocate for the reality of their local community. So when I think about my school board goes as far north as Apsley. It goes as far east as Trenton, and then it buttresses up against Richard and Curtis. What is the local reality in terms of what a school needs in Apsley versus Curtis versus Trenton? In those three regions that I just described, there's 3 different medical officers of health, 3 different public health organizations, right? 3 different unique communities that now have one phone number to call if there's a problem. One executive officer to handle all those problems. It doesn't actually make sense. And from what I can tell, it's actually more financially expensive to run an office like that than it is to run the trustee model the way it is right now. So it's not even financially savvy to do it. So I really struggle with this as a theory. I think it is a slapdash, to Richard's point, distraction, just to say change for the sake of change. That's how it lands for me.
Chris, your primary interest is the well-being of teachers in your boards, which is part of helping them to be better professionals, leading to more effective schools. This follows the ideal that Simon Sinek talks about. Make sure your employees are happy and they will make your clients happy. And clients in this case are students. We only hear about teachers being unhappy over wages and during contract negotiations. What is really wearing teachers down right now?
Well, I find your question kind of interesting to begin with, because I actually don't see the role of the union only being about helping teachers be better professionals. Now, I'm a bit of a politically activated guy, so perhaps I've got some pie in the sky ideas here, but sure, we have a duty of fair representation to as a core mandate. But I also see that we're actually part of the protection and the accountability of public education as a whole. It's actually what our provincial constitution guides us to do. It does a lot more than having to intercede when something goes wrong or to bargain for a good contract or anything. So when I look at what's wearing down on teachers, those are the things that the government doesn't want to center during a public relations campaign. Wages are low-hanging fruit. It's easy. It resonates. It's a quick little soundbite, right? Job satisfaction is at an all-time low in the schools in which I represent. And that has to do with a lot of different things that Doug Ford and company don't want to talk about. It's about budget crunches. It's about large class sizes. It's about being unable to provide the students what they need to be successful due to a lack of resources or appropriate safety plans. And the safety plans isn't just about violence in the classroom towards staff. Staff feel like they can't intercede when it is student on student issues either, right? They struggle with what progressive discipline has become. And they struggled with the fact that the cost of busing has gone up and up and up and up. And so even coaches and clubs and teams don't function the way they used to anymore. We just don't have the money for it. So we're in a teacher shortage right now in Ontario. And it's not because we have a lack of licensed teachers. It's because people don't see the work as worth it anymore. If the wages and the vacations were so magical and special as it often ends up in these contract negotiations, why can't we find the people to fill the jobs? Right? It actually completely undermines the argument about teacher greed and teacher laziness, in my opinion. Again, far be it for me to be a bit of a biased source on that.
Richard?
That's a great response, Chris. And quite honestly, I've always said this in schools that I've been in, that when you value your employees, the system works, and it really does. But in terms of wearing people down, Chris has alluded to some of these, and I started with this at the beginning with regards to less supports, right? When there isn't as many supports in the schools for students, I mean, in spec ed specifically, sometimes that leads to workplace injuries. That is wearing staff down. As Chris alluded to, behaviors and the progressive discipline, that's true too. Like, the system itself is struggling in a way to kind of address things academically and behaviorally, kind of a bit unlike what it was before. But at the same time, that really does play on the staff's ability and willingness and wanting to be valued in the school community. And so those two things alone are really putting some stress on what we see the teachers in our system.
And I do supply work as an administrator, and I see that all those things that you've talked about weighing very heavily on teachers. And we don't have to go too far in news stories anywhere, like back in history or anything, to see things that are happening that are really do not draw people to the profession, or the professions that are involved on a daily basis, whether they're EAs. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just add, and again, if you need a data point that is perhaps, I think, the most alarming, and again, as someone who was a former administrator, when I was a student in school and when I was a young teacher for the first 10 years of my career, I can't even remember the last time I was seeing administrators go off on sick leave. I mean, people would need to have surgery or people whatever. I have never seen the amount of people who are in positions of responsibility who are just hitting that wall, or are either they themselves experiencing a workplace injury because of something related to underfunding in the system. It is a higher rate than I have ever seen. So even the people who you see as like the generals and the people who are like the mortar holding the whole thing together, we're losing them too. We're losing people that I'm shocked that we're losing.
And Chris, I appreciate you acknowledging that administrators are feeling the weight too.
Well, there's something interesting about the union saying it's so bad that we're even having to advocate on behalf of our administrator colleagues. And I do that all the time at the senior team and my own school board. And they always go like, what? And I'm like, well, I mean, you think I just come here and lie? No, take care of your people, for the love of God. They're workers too.
Is it politically awkward to discuss the education governance possibilities these days? Richard?
No, from our perspective as OSSTF, no. I mean, that's what we do. We always advocate for our members provincially, right, through a publicly funded system. So we don't find it awkward. We can still have conversations with the employer, but sometimes their responses are hindered based on something. So perhaps discussions at the employer level can be, not awkward, but just unproductive might be the word. But no, generally it's not awkward to discuss this, because that's kind of what, unions do.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, having awkward or hard conversations is what I'm thankfully that I'm paid to do every day right now. I mean, it's great. But to Richard's point, it's not awkward. Speaking truth to power is not awkward for me or anybody who's doing OSSTF work. I think that people who are in the classroom or have more proximity to the ministry will feel a fear of reprisal about speaking back about where they see the pitfalls. But I've had lots of conversations with people about Bill 33, which is the number of the act that's being referenced in this conversation, right? And I don't have glowing reviews, as I said, about the system we have now, but a central oversight by Queen's Park or somebody who is a singular supervisor in a school board as a new form of governance, or even worse, some sort of consolidation beyond that in the future. Again, it neglects the local realities and nuance required to be a good service provider, right? As much as, I like Richard as a person and I like the people in D13, a downtown Oshawa school will have very little to do with Campbellford District High School, right? Which is a very unique small community in the northern part of my board. And I fear about when any hard cut or pivot as a recipe for disaster and disruption. If and when these things happen, and I take a look at what's happened in Toronto, and I take a look at what's happened in Ottawa, and that's what's happened when those supervisors have gone in, is that communication has gone down, transparency has gone down, and things just happen. They literally just happen, and that's not a way to lead. So I know that if a supervisor were appointed to a large selection of boards, it's not actually a decision made for better outcomes for kids. It's not. It's for something else. I think personally, just me conjecture, right? It's about ensuring that less eyes are on the real impacts of defunded education. It's about consolidation of power to make decisions that serves purposes that perhaps we aren't aware of what those are. And I also think about it has to ensure that Queen's Park gets to make unilateral decisions about valuable land, right? Like that's something that I think is something that people aren't talking about enough, not to drag the Greenbelt and Science Center and all that sort of stuff back in, but it really feels like land development is a big narrative that extends across lots of decisions in this government. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing school land in expensive parts of Toronto being sold off. And I know that, that's something that could happen in lots of spaces. So again, conjecture on my part, but I don't have trust because I'm not being told the things that I need to know. That's the truth of it. And that's what this is going to be about.
And Richard, I think that's an extension of what Chris said of what you were saying, that the vagaries of people just don't know what the plans are, right?
Correct.
There's been no clear expression. And I do recall many years ago sitting with the director in Durham, and that was the message, was that we just don't know what's going to happen. And it's hard to do anything when you don't know that information. So in the absence of the truth, or the absence of what's really happening, you get that conjecture and possibility thinking, right? So I appreciate that response. Do you think it's likely we're going to see changes in education governance prior to the election this year in October 2026?
Are you asking me what my bet is?
Chris, yes, I guess, yeah. Not changes in the personnel, but changes in the structure.
I think there's a better than 50-50 chance that there are no trustees in the fall. That's what I am operating under right now, right? And so in every conversation I have with superintendents or other people in my school board, when we talk about what does next year look like, it's always hypothetical about do we have to run it through board or not. So I would say better than 50-50.
Gotcha. Richard?
My conjecture is that we don't have trustees moving forward. I think that is kind of where they're heading. Again, as you said before, absence of information. That's conjecture, but I do feel that way. I do think that trustees are used by school communities, and I don't know where people are going to turn as a result of that, but that's my gut. If you're asking me to choose, I do feel like we're moving away from school trustees as a result. And as Chris said, school trustees, I mean, the system is flawed. I mean, we've seen even in Durham, how the trustees have kind of played out in some cases, but at the same time, they are elected by the communities. And so that piece will be removed, I think.
And school boards are huge, and there's, I mean, in one school community, you know, secondary schools like what the three of us have dealt with, you know, there's anywhere from 400 to 2,000 students, and you know, whatever number of families puts those kids there, and that's a lot of people and a lot of voices that, as you said, Chris, are going through one point of contact now in the entire board. Um, the one thing that I did read or heard before the contact was made with that student support office was that they had to go through the school situation. But even then, you know, reducing 3 or 4 or 5 areas worth of trustees down to one office, that that makes it a much larger problem. So it'll be it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I suspect that what we're talking about here and the concerns we're raising will be more the reality than not. So, what are some areas of improvement your boards have to work on in order to fulfill the newly passed Supporting Children and Students Act? Richard, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it's challenging, right? Because it's hard to determine what our board will do and go with, because they don't have the information yet, and we're always open for consultation, absolutely, and we want to be part of the solution, and that's really what we try to do in District 13 OSSTF, and I'm sure Chris tries to in Kawartha. We do work collaboratively with the Ed Center, the board, to kind of come up with solutions, but right now we don't know exactly where things are going. But I would say that it is generally a collaborative process. And so we ask to be consulted. We are consulted. We do provide feedback. Not always does that feedback get accepted, but that's the nature of kind of what we do. But we do have an understanding of the public school system. We do have an understanding of what it's like in the schools, and we do speak on behalf of the membership who are sharing information with us and concerns with us. And so we'll continue to do that moving forward.
So when I go and I actually, I pulled up the law, and you may have prompted me on this question, and when I went and looked at the actual provisions of the law, and I said, okay, so if I'm sitting here, because we haven't had these kinds of conversations with our board yet. To Richard's point, we do have those collaborative labor management discussions where we throw out the ideas and don't worry about money, and and try our best to sort of plant seeds of goodness and all that. But when I take a look at the actual letters of the law, of the law as it sits, I actually don't think there's much my board has to do at all, right? Because it talks about being financially managed, right? Our board has a compliant budget as it sits right now, right? Like it passed it last year. The trustee group is viable and meeting regularly. They're following all their governance rules. The senior team is engaged and available. They're doing all the things, and then in some cases even beyond the expectations, where they actually have another layer of accountability in the Human Rights Office, where people can actually approach the board to seek concerns above and beyond what's actually there. So I really don't feel as if the only pitfall of putting this act in place is that I know the budget is very tight, like they're over the line, but I mean, it's not, and there's not a lot of breathing room there. And now they're being asked to create an office that is going to be needlessly expensive, including paying another executive officer and having staff and all that. I don't know where that money's coming from. And I don't believe that the board is being given a dime to do it. So I worry that that is actually going to put us out of compliance with the actual law itself. Following the law is going to screw up the budget. So again, I'll have to see that. But another thing I'll plan in terms of a seat that I find to be a little bit problematic, so we haven't talked about in this conversation, is the provisions around policing in schools. That's one of the things that is in the law that's actually not being talked a lot. And we did offer the board some feedback about it. And I also know that some of the communities have also done that, which is our school board, in good faith, has signed Indigenous partnerships with the 3 Indigenous communities that live within the boundaries. And they have some very clear parameters around what they are comfortable with and not comfortable with in which the schools in which their children attend. And this unilateral, singular approach to what policing in schools looks like may run contrary to those Indigenous partnerships. And that really raises a red flag for me around the fact that any unilateral provision like this coming from Queen's Park regarding what policing is in schools without consulting the communities in which those schools are embedded is just a way to sow chaos in the system. And so there's going to be some of our school communities that will welcome more policing in schools, and there's going to be others that aren't going to want it. And then we have the Indigenous partnerships on top of it with sovereignty-seeking people that it could very well darken the relationship there that we have done our best to try to build over the past 10 years. So again, stress on the system for no real gain or clear purpose, right? So I don't know what Bill 33 is really going to mean yet, but I see worrisome signs.
I sit here and I think back to your responses to one of the earlier questions and the idea of a distraction. And it almost sounds like, this whole bill really is a distraction from other more important things, and getting sidelined on interesting things maybe, but not necessarily important things. Wow. Chris and Richard, I really appreciate the time you've taken today to meet me at Exit 425. And how can people learn more about what OSSTF, the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, is concerned about or working on? Is there a way to do that? Either of you.
Well, I'll start if you'd like. So I think as much as, hey, feel free to follow our social medias and all that sort of as a local district. I actually think that if a member of the public is really interested in what the core message is, following something like the provincial OSSTF Facebook group is a good place to start. I think that especially doing it in between bargaining rounds, because we're not in bargaining right now. We'll be in bargaining in about a year or so, hopefully, maybe sooner, but probably a year. We'll give a better sense of what we stand for. And one of the slogans that I've really resonated with me in between rounds of bargaining is that we really stand for what is called better schools, stronger communities, right? If schools are taken care of and schools are prioritized and made the community hubs that they should be, it's actually a sign of a value of a service that pays off economically, embeds good citizenship and good ideals in everybody, and makes communities feel cohesive. And if you're prioritizing a corporate approach to education and you're undermining that, then that's problematic. So you don't need to let a media organization interpret any messages from you from provincial OSSTF. Go check out their Facebook group. You don't even have to follow them. I'm sure it's all public. Go and check it out and go and see what the kinds of stuff that we put up in between bargaining rounds, because I really think that you'd be surprised that we're really not just talking about teachers' wages and summer vacation, to nobody's shock.
Not to most people's shock, put it that way. Richard, any final thoughts?
There isn't a whole lot that I can add to what Chris just indicated, but other than just reiterating the fact that, it's not always about salaries. It really isn't. Our teachers really do want to make a difference in the schools, and they absolutely want the supports in place for that. And so we do a lot of work around trying to make sure those supports are available. And so when you see messaging like what Chris said, that's exactly why we do that messaging. That's what we're trying to advocate. So going back to an earlier question, is it awkward to talk about these things? No, because that's what we do. And we want to try to push public education as the priority, as the importance, as it should be. So there isn't a whole lot that I can add to Chris's comments.
Again, I appreciate you guys taking the time today to speak with me and meet me here at Exit 425. To your point, Richard, or Chris, rather, you talked about getting information without the buffering of the mainstream media. That's why I do Exit 425, is to get the voices of the people involved to other people directly so that they can hear what's going on in their communities. Thank you very much for being tremendous representatives of OSSTF today.
Thank
you very much. Thanks for having me.